welcome to this edition of Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I am Dustin, and I am here today with Dan Lipow, who is one of the co-founders of Dining Wild and one of the co-founders of
Destination
Arts and some other, or previous one, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. The reason I had you on is that you forage for food, and some of your organizations do specifically that thing. So first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
First of all, tell us about your different organizations.
Well, so for 20 years, I've been a professional photographer.
Okay.
And in that capacity, I worked and traveled in New York and around the world as a photographer for advertising and corporate, as well as UN projects and human rights work that I did as well. The Destination Arts piece grew out of that. At a certain point, I was asked to do a bunch of teaching, one-on-one for people. And then that developed into teaching some small groups, and I was asked to go teach in Italy a week-long workshop. It was a blast. We had a great time. And then from there, I went back again and again, and on a trip to Venice in 2007, I met Kate McLaughlin, my partner in Destination Arts.
Okay.
And she's a painter and was teaching a painting workshop. The two of us hit it off, and after that, we decided we wanted to go do something else and do our workshops that we've been doing with the group in Italy, but elsewhere. So we went to Mexico and just pulled together a group of people and created a space there that was similar to what we had done in Italy, where we sort of took over a small hotel and really immersed ourselves in the culture for a week of art with a group of people. It was a huge success, and since then we've done a bunch of other trips, several in Mexico to Chiapas and to Oaxaca in the south of Mexico. And then we've done Barcelona, Spain, and Provence, and have been back to Italy as well on those trips.
And so your component is the photography, and am I correct in assuming that it's digital photography?
It's digital photography.
And then Kate is more of the...
She is a painter and printmaker.
Okay.
She's the current president of the Woodstock School of Art up in Woodstock, New York.
Okay.
And a serious painter. As an artist, I'm a hack compared to her.
So is it like oil painting? Is it watercolors?
Well, she works in all medium, but the most amazing stuff she does is the printmaking on the press. And so they cut plates and they do all sorts of amazing things with different inks and processes. It's beautiful. And
that's something that people don't usually do a lot of now, because people have computers to do that kind of printing. So this is really an art for her to do something like that.
It's really art. It's beautiful.
So from Destination Arts, so you're still doing that as well?
So Destination Arts is still going. We have a trip to Barcelona in October, and now we're in the early, we're about to start putting together and plan the trip to Oaxaca, Mexico again next February into March.
Oh, okay.
And so there'll be a trip there.
And what is the website for Destination Arts?
That's destination-arts.com.
And that's arts plural?
Arts plural.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And what we've changed recently is we've brought in a whole bunch of other artists. So we're taking a directorial approach and expanding the workshops and adding other arts. We're adding a cooking class. We're adding a ukulele class. We have these amazing musicians, James Hill and Ann Janelle, who James is really one of the preeminent ukulele players in the world. I know that sounds crazy, but he is brilliant. And his wife Ann Janelle plays the cello, and the two of them together is just spectacular. They're coming back to Oaxaca with us to teach again.
Are these groups? How big are these groups?
Each of the arts, you end up with 6 to 12 or even 15 people in one group. So we're hoping to have maybe 40 people with us in Barcelona, and a similar number back in Oaxaca next year.
That's pretty awesome. So you're taking these people to these, for a lot of these people, is this their first time going to these particular destinations, or are they used to traveling?
For a lot of them, for some of them it is. Some of them have been, but often it's their first time in these places. And we really show them the food and the culture and the history and all the art. And so it's a great trip. And the way that leads into the Dining Wild is that I got into foraging a bunch of years ago.
Can you explain to people what foraging is?
Foraging is the acquisition of food from nature. I mean, you're looking for plants and fungi and animals if you have the inclination. Not everybody goes that far, but the plants and fungi most people can handle.
Okay.
And so I do a bunch of leading of walks and workshops about that and teaching people how to identify different plants. And thank you for bringing these in today. They're great. Some Japanese knotweed and some mugwort. So.
Yes, I remembered from the walk that I went on with you, so I knew these two. I was confident in bringing those two in.
I'm going to have to use them as a centerpiece myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Destination Arts became a platform or a launching pad for dining.
Well, Dining Wild is coming out of the things I'm doing with all the foraging and food. But because of Destination Arts, I sort of have a system in place and a knowledge base of how to put together experiential trips and workshops. And so in addition to doing just one day walks like you've been on, our plan for Dining Wild is to create an education base and a website where you can go on walks locally here, and you can go on walks regionally, where we'll start to pull those together and do those. So we're looking at some things down in the Jersey Shore, like a day of seaside clamming and foraging. We want to expand it as well to some bigger things. I've got my partner in this, and the way I got into this with him is he's the one who took me hunting the first time.
Okay.
Just a few years ago, I had a serious case of adult onset hunting. And that's a whole other set of stories we'll go into some other time. But so I broke all records and took a deer in the first 2 hours of hunting for deer, and I took a turkey 2 hours into hunting for wild turkeys. And if you ask hunters, they're like, "What? That's impossible." So
really?
There's that whole side. But he and I really bonded on this stuff, and he met me. I was in the woods with two people taking them on a walk, and we were looking at mushrooms, and he walked up and said, "What's going on here?" And he had this dog, and the dog was obviously a hunting dog. Like, he was just so sharp and quick to do what was supposed to be done. So it just came out of that. And we want to take people on trips, and he has a business called weatherwool.com.
Weatherwool, okay.
Weatherwool. It's a hunting wool clothing business.
Okay.
And so he's really immersed in that, but he has a lot of contacts in different lodges in different places, and so we're looking at trips in Vancouver Island, BC, and down in the south, in Texas and in South Carolina. We have some locations we'd be interested to take people to forage and hunt and do sort of an all-encompassing 3-day or week-long journey where you really build your woods knowledge and your woods skills, and you eat from the land for the whole week.
And so so whatever you're teaching these people, they can actually take back home, and they'll understand, like, this is, you can eat this particular.
Right. I mean, in much the same way that on a walk here in the woods in South Mountain, I could lead people around and show them a bunch of things, and we'll look at some a little later in the show.
That's right, we'll look at some.
But we'll identify them, and every time I'm out there, I'm still learning. I've been doing this for a bunch of years, and I grew up doing bits and pieces of it. My parents would take us in the woods, and we'd eat some, wild raspberries and stuff. But it really took off actually when I lived in the city, and a friend called me and said he was bringing over a mushroom, and we had to Iron Chef it. And I'm like, "You're bringing over a mushroom, and we have to Iron Chef it." So he brings over a giant puffball mushroom. The thing is this big, just a solid marshmallow. And we looked, he brought it in his book, and he's like, this is it, dude. This is one of the foolproof 4. And there's these mushrooms that are considered foolproof.
And what is foolproof?
Foolproof means,
That you won't,
well, it's in,
you won't be
not on the cover
sick
of those.
or anything?
They're really easy to identify.
Oh, okay.
So if you were out in the woods and you see this giant white sphere of a mushroom, a little bit
Right.
pitted and dirty on the outside, and you cut it open and it's just a marshmallow, there's nothing else it can be. It's going to be a giant puffball.
Okay, okay.
And it's a safe mushroom. So we took that thing, proudly walking through the streets of the city, and went over to Whole Foods and started looking for ingredients, and brought it to the produce manager and all that, and had a really, really funny time doing it, and cooked it all up. And cooking is a passion of mine. So
Oh, okay.
we did things like took cubes of the mushroom and put a half of a beautiful plum on top and wrapped it in this gorgeous maple bacon, and then roasted it, and it all the fat it was perfect.
That sounds delicious.
Delicious.
And so these are the kind of these are for dining.
Dining Wild.
For Dining Wild, you'll take people.
We'll take people out and spend time and do this
exact thing.
Yeah.
So does this mean, when I think of Dining Wild, does that mean that you're also going to do the whole tent thing? Like you're
Well, it could
living
be
off the land?
We're
so
going to
to
live
speak?
off the land, and some of it may actually be camping.
Okay.
More likely, it's like cabins and lodges that we're looking into doing, or bed and breakfast. I mean, we see this as something that we want people to enjoy and have a great experience. And if we get into one that's really hardcore, great. But the people will know, we'll advertise it that way. So,
Okay.
yeah, and then.
And you'll just go from there, because I'm sure a lot of people will want to, understand, like they'll understand the technique, and then they can take it home and
Right,
they can figure out locally what they can do.
Right. It's
So-
a sort of I see it as a launching pad for people who are really already interested, but really want to immerse themselves, and whether it's immerse themselves in a different place, like Vancouver, BC, where, it's very different than here, or just really get a handle on how to ID things and what the process is, and how you think about it, and also how you then take what you found and actually cook it. Because for
That
some
sounds
people,
awesome.
that's a big challenge.
So we're going to do that in the second half of the show,
Great.
because I know you've brought some fabulous things. So we'll be right back. I'm Dustin. This is Dustin's Kaleidoscope, and we'll be back in a second.
Local government, local educational institutions, and local community members all use cable access TV to communicate their message. They depend upon it as an affordable means of outreach. Public educational and government access television empowers local government agencies, individuals, and groups to use the media to speak directly to their constituents in a more direct and cost-effective way. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
Welcome back to Dustin's Kaleidoscope. We are still here with Dan Lipow, and you're going to tell. Now you have brought out quite an array of things for us to learn about.
I brought a bunch of things that I went out in the drizzle today and picked up for you, because I knew it'd be fun to share all of this with you.
Yeah,
and as we were talking about before, on a trip you'd learn, or on a walk, this is what you might get in one day if we go out and go hunting.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so
where do you want to begin?
Let's
Let's start with a couple of my key tools, right?
Okay.
I've got a basket here. This
Okay.
goes with me a lot of the time if I'm just going out foraging on my own, or I might take something like a simple shoulder bag like this,
okay.
or these little fold-up bags. That,
Okay.
the grocery
Yes.
bag.
Yep.
And this is the best, especially for mushrooms. These are little mesh bags that you can just stuff things in. I have half a dozen of these, so when I'm collecting different things, I can put different things in different bags.
I see. Okay, so
Um,
it
so
has
I
nothing
do-
to do with mushrooms. It's
Well,
just
with
that
mushrooms, it is important because you want the mushrooms reproduced by spores
Mm-hmm.
on the bottom surfaces of them. And if you put them in these mesh bags and you're walking through the forest, you're kind of spreading the spores. So you're kind of
Oh, okay.
seeding your next crop, hopefully.
Got it.
So
And I noticed you have a paper bag too. Is that?
I do have a paper
Is that
bag, just a regular old, grocery bag. And even just plastic grocery bags are great as well. I like the paper ones for certain things that I collect.
Okay.
And for instance, I'm going to put a glove on because there's no other way to deal with this one. We've got stinging nettle. This is one that is showing up in the early spring. This now has the flower racemes on it.
Okay.
A lot of people say once it flowers, it's not really good anymore. I tend to disagree, though. I've taken them beyond this, maybe not, but up until now, they're still great. And you snip off the leaves and saute them up or make them into a pesto. The only problem is you have to wear gloves while dealing with them, because if I picked that up right now, I'd get stung. I'd get prickly stuff all over me, and
Okay.
it's quite painful.
But once it's been
Once you
sauteed, it's
cook it
perfectly fine.
and saute it or boil it down for a few minutes and it wilts, then it's perfectly fine and actually delicious. It has a really interesting texture,
Huh.
a little bit of like a grittiness to it.
Okay.
And it's green. It just tastes so green. It's got more protein than any other plant that we know of that you can eat.
Oh, well, that's an interesting
From what I've read
tidbit.
about it, and it's very good for seasonal allergies.
Oh, really?
Medicinally, it was used to help seasonal
tea
allergies
form
in tea form
or-
often.
Interesting.
And you could just chuck them in a pot and make a pot of tea out of it, and it's tasty and very green.
Wow, okay.
So that's one thing. I also have a couple of tools. This is a little digging tool for gardening, but it's my favorite lightweight tool for taking out in the woods to dig up some roots and things. And just a tiny little pocket knife, is usually what you need for
that's
most
nice.
things. Or for things like those nettles, a little pair of snips.
Okay.
And you can go into a lot of different tools, but those are the things that are sort of with me
All the
normally,
time.
and that are my lightweight kit that can just fit in a light bag and I can go
Okay.
and really have a great time.
Because you don't really need like the big shovel. Like if you're going to go foraging, you're not carrying
No,
around the big
no.
shovel.
Although if I'm going
and-
for something like burdock, I might go
oh,
take a big
okay.
shovel because I'm going for a root that could be this long and I
Got
gotta dig.
it. Okay.
So that kind of thing.
Okay.
So different. We have a whole bunch of things here. Let me show you a couple that are really important, actually.
Okay.
When you come foraging with me, the first rule: when in doubt, throw it out. Okay. If you
Okay.
don't know what it is 100%, then it's not edible. That's how
Okay.
how you play it. So here I've got these beautiful greens here, right? And this is actually two different greens.
Oh.
And one
It
is
reminds me of
edible
like a
and one is poisonous. And
Seriously. Wow.
people sometimes apparently confuse them. Now, this leaf is flat and sort of fans out over here,
Yes.
where this leaf comes out. I'm going to hold this right in the front here so we can see it. It comes out, and the leaves
Like a palm.
all like a
leaf.
palm leaf, right? This is actually a common daylily, those orange flowers
Oh,
in the
sure,
summer.
yes.
So this is the flower buds right here at the tip.
Uh-huh.
This pretty much everything is edible on this plant, which is
I
incredible.
did not know that. Okay.
And these little tubers are delicious. They're sort of like radishes, but not sharp. They're just kind of sweet and delicious. And the stem here is also great. I'm just going to give you a taste of it.
Of course.
Why not? You want to try that?
Sure.
It should be pretty good. Kind of got a good sweet flavor. I'll have a
looks
nibble
actually-
with you.
Wow. Okay, I have to say, I didn't expect it. I'm thinking,
And these are-
flowers, not.
This one, we should have pulled a couple of the outer leaves off. It's a little tough, those outer leaves.
Mm-hmm.
But the center of this is sweet and delicious.
It is very
The
nice.
flower buds here
Mm-hmm.
are great. Once these grow bigger, they're fantastic sauteed.
Can you actually use the bloomed flower
You
as well?
can use the bloom flower on this. This is a really versatile plant. These little nubs are fantastic.
Okay.
Also, this on the other hand is an iris,
Oh, okay.
and irises are definitely not. Now the big difference, the way the leaves come out, but also the root structure. This
Right.
has these tubers, where this is one
Oh, okay.
rhizome. So that's one thing we've got here. Why don't we look at something else what does this smell like if you take a sniff of that?
Oh, that's definitely root beer.
It's a root beer, right? This is
Oh, yes,
sassafras,
yes.
right? And so if you take the root section of this,
Uh-huh.
you chop it into a pot and boil it up and add some other roots, some burdock, some dandelion,
Yeah.
and then let it boil and simmer up for a while. Let it cool, add some sugar, and put it
Root
mix
beer?
and then reduce it. You've got root beer.
Wow.
The other thing though is gumbo filet, which is actually like a high-end product comes from the leaves. You dry these leaves, you grind them up. That's gumbo filet, and it's used as a thickener in gumbo at the last stage of making gumbo.
Seriously? Oh.
Yeah. And that's what sassafras is all about.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. And these are all things people would find out about if they came on a Dining Wild
If
tour
you
that
come on a
happened to be
Dining
in this
Wild Walker
area.
tour, we would walk around for 2-3 hours and come back, and you'd have things like this. We have the stinging nettles. These are dandelion greens picked
yeah.
right out of the edge of a field. They're really wonderful, sautéed up. This over here is something called garlic mustard, a terribly invasive plant.
Okay.
So you can pick all you want. The root is like horseradish. The leaves, especially on the younger, it's a 2-year cycle on this plant. So
Oh,
these are
really?
the first year, these just little clumps of stuff like this.
Okay.
The next year, it puts up these big flower shoots that turn into these little seed pods. Now this is probably
Oh, and that's how they regenerate. Okay.
very peppery. These little seed pods, they're kind of interesting and very peppery.
Okay.
And the leaves are, in the early spring, are delicious. And I love them just in salads, mixed with like sweet lettuces. And then you put these in, they got like a sharp, garlicky, mustardy flavor. And
Wow.
they're really great.
These are just things that you would find.
All around.
Okay.
This is a wild lettuce, wild
Oh.
prickly lettuce.
You don't have to wear gloves with this, I see.
No, it's
because-
you can feel it. It's got some little prickles, but they're not.
Oh, okay.
And it
They're
doesn't
not like
leave
the
any.
stinging
Doesn't leave
nettle.
like a stinging nettle. And an interesting thing here is if you break this, it'll let out this white latexy juice, and that's one of the characteristics. When you're looking at certain leaves, you might look for a feature like that to
Okay.
help you identify it. Or the rib on the bottom has all these little red hairs on it.
Oh, okay.
You know, these are things that are identifying of this species of plant. Now, the nutritional value on stuff like this is off the charts. Like lettuce in the store, not so much. But this is like crazy good for you.
Really?
Yeah, really good.
Now, is part of that because it's grown wild, or is it just a species that has not been exploited commercially?
A lot of these things that you forage tend to have really sharp, strong flavors.
Okay.
It turns out that we as humans, when we started to cultivate things, we would self-select for sweetness. And
Oh, I
sweetness
see.
tends to be less nutritional. So
Interesting. Okay.
we've selected out all of the nutrition that was in the wild forebears of the plants that we cultivate today, which is one reason to forage. When I look back at my life the last 10 years, I'd say I used to get half my food at the supermarket and 35% at restaurants, and a little bit at a farmer's market and foraging.
Right.
Nowadays, I get half of my food, especially during the summer months, I get half of my food out of my garden.
Seriously.
And
Wow.
another 25 or 30% is foraged. And so I'm growing really good greens and other vegetables, and then I'm foraging things like dandelion and other things that are just really nutritionally just fantastic for you.
And so when you started out foraging, I know you explained that this was something that even as a child you were introduced
Right.
to. How did you get to the point where you felt confident enough that you felt like, okay, this is exactly what it is and it's not going
Right.
to poison me?
So in the beginning, I told you my friend showed up with this mushroom in a book, and
That's
we looked
right.
at it and we said, that's it, we're good. So I started getting some books, and I started looking on the internet, and I hand out on my walks, I might hand out a sheet like this that has some resource books and things on it.
Okay.
It also has some things to do, like, tread lightly, educate yourself, know what you're doing, and cross-reference 3 resources before you commit to eating a wild food.
Okay.
And really, that's 3 resources on 3 occasions. So
Okay.
I often wouldn't collect something until I've seen it and lived with it for a while and found it in multiple environments.
Okay.
So that I really feel like I know it.
And you feel like you're not going to get
Because when you're cross-referencing, you different references will then reference other things that look like it. So then you go read a little passage about this other thing that looks like it that isn't it. So
Exactly.
and that may be good or may not be good, but now each step along that way broadens your knowledge base, And that's what it's about, really, is the knowledge base. You know, people talk about mushrooms, get very scared about the foraging of mushrooms.
Yes.
Now these,
and
right
we have
here-
about 1
we
minute
got a minute.
left.
All right. These are oyster mushrooms.
Okay.
But taken out of the woods. They have such a beautiful scent
very
and flavor that
very
you would
fresh.
never get in the store. And this is a chicken mushroom or a sulfur shelf, but in the spring, when they show up, they often don't have the yellow characteristic bottom, they have a white bottom,
Oh, okay.
at least in this area. And so all of these things are ways of determining what you have. It's about building up that knowledge base, and that's what Dining Wild is about. It's about giving you the education.
and tell us
and
again,
the
what is
experience.
I'm sorry to cut you off. What is the URL for Dining Wild if people want to find out more?
www.diningwild.com.
Okay. That
And-
sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing all of this and explaining. And I especially like your motto of if you don't,
When in doubt,
doubt,
throw it
throw
out.
it out. So
There's no-
everyone,
there's no
you hear
wiggle
that?
room there. No
Exactly.
wiggle room.
Exactly. And
That's
the 3
it.
resources. So thank you so
Thank you,
much. I
Dustin.
want you to come back and tell us even more because we just went over just a few things.
It was quick.
Yes, it was. But until next time, I'm
Well, I
Dustin.
had a great time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have just watched Dustin's Kaleidoscope, and we will see you next time. Bye.